You know what really messes with your head? Thinking you've moved forward, built a life together, only to realize your husband's been keeping score for 16 straight years. I'm Veronica. I'm 38 now, and I just lived through what can only be described as the most carefully plotted takedown I've ever seen. And the wild part? Everyone thinks he's the good guy. Liam and I tied the knot young. I was 22, he was 24. We were both total wrecks back then, coming from families that could have been reality TV disasters. His dad was a mean drunk. His mom numbed herself with pills. My family wasn't any better. Emotional abuse, neglect, chaos. The only difference was I learned to adapt and keep moving, while Liam spent years bouncing through therapy programs, acting like he was on some sacred quest for inner peace. And sure, good for him for cleaning up his act. But he never let anyone forget that he was the one doing the work, while the rest of us were stumbling through life. He was at AA meetings non-stop, signing up for individual therapy, couples counseling, family sessions, you name it. Liam showed up with his little notebook like he was prepping for a final exam. Meanwhile, I was clocking full-time hours to keep the lights on while he was off, finding himself. We had life mapped out like a business plan. Kids by year 5. Mortgage gone by year 10. Retirement savings at year 12. Every milestone scheduled because Liam needed structure like oxygen. But in year 4 of our marriage, things shifted. We had this mutual friend, Austin, who Liam was sponsoring in recovery. He was around constantly. And when Liam was off at yet another meeting, Austin and I started talking more. At first, it was innocent, someone I could vent to about feeling like a ghost in my own marriage. Liam was so wrapped up in his personal growth that he forgot his wife needed care too. Anytime I tried to say I felt lonely, he'd tell me to find a therapist or join Al-Anon. Everything had to be part of some program. There was no space for being raw, flawed, human. And eventually, the thing with Austin turned into more. It started with texts, then coffee, and eventually it crossed the line. I'm not proud of it. But when you feel unseen, sometimes you make choices that are reckless. Around that same time, there was also a guy at work. Looking back, I was clearly acting out because I felt abandoned at home. When Liam found out about Austin, it was like watching him morph into someone else. He didn't just confront me, he came armed with proof. Text threads printed, photos, a timeline so detailed it looked like a case file. He'd been tracking me for weeks, turning himself into a private investigator. Of course, I denied it at first. Who wouldn't when their husband shows up with an FBI dossier? But when someone knows where you were on specific dates, denial collapses. When I finally confessed, I thought maybe he'd acknowledge that our marriage had cracks that left me vulnerable. But no, according to Liam, I was simply the traitor wife, and he was the wounded saint stabbed by his best friend and spouse. No talk about his emotional absence. No questions about why I strayed. Just me being the villain. He dragged me through a humiliating process of confessions. I had to write timelines, answer the same questions over and over in counseling, cut off Austin and the coworker, even change jobs. Every inch of my life was put under his microscope. And I thought, stupidly, that it meant we were repairing things. I followed every rule. I did individual therapy, relived my mistakes in couple sessions, endured his constant suspicions. I believed we were building something stronger. We stuck to the plan and started trying for kids. I got pregnant within months. Liam acted thrilled, or at least played the part well. I thought a baby would finally seal the cracks, give us a future to focus on. What I didn't know was that my husband had turned into a forensic auditor of my life. While I was throwing up from morning sickness, Liam was combing through my medical history. He found a receipt for Plan B from around the time of conception and just kept it, waiting. Picture this, I'm carrying his child, we're picking out names and nursery furniture, and the entire time he's holding this piece of paper like a weapon, biding his time. He waited until I was 2 weeks postpartum to strike. I was exhausted, hormonal, drowning in sleepless nights. He walked in holding the receipt and asked why I took emergency contraception if we were trying for a baby. How do you even answer that when your brain feels like soup from newborn chaos? The dates didn't even line up cleanly. I'd taken Plan B after being with a guy from work. Then, a few days later, right during my actual fertile window, Liam and I slept together. That's when I conceived. But try explaining that to someone who's already decided you're a liar. He demanded a paternity test, which felt like the lowest blow. I knew the baby was his. The timeline lined up exactly once I thought it through. But Liam wouldn't hear reason. When the results confirmed what I already knew, he didn't apologize. He just pulled further away. That's when he announced we'd reconcile for the sake of the child. Not because he loved me. Not because he wanted us to rebuild. But because, in his words, it was the responsible choice. Like I was some burden he was nobly carrying instead of his wife and the mother of his son. The next 12 years were psychological warfare dressed up as marriage. Liam never truly moved past year 4. Every fight somehow circled back to my affairs. Every time I wanted to see friends or go out, I was cross-examined like I was on probation. He'd remind me how lucky I was that he stayed when any other man would have walked. He used my past like a permanent weapon, pulling it out whenever he needed to win or cut me down. Meanwhile, he acted like staying married to me was this giant sacrifice he was making for our child's benefit. Every holiday, every anniversary, every trip, it all felt like I should be thanking him for tolerating me. And strangely, our sex life was the best it had ever been. Maybe because I was always trying to prove something, and maybe because he enjoyed the power it gave him. But emotionally, we were strangers co-parenting under one roof. I kept believing time would heal him, that eventually he'd forgive me. But Liam never did. He just learned to cloak his bitterness in therapy jargon and polished forgiveness. As the years went on, I felt suffocated, walking on eggshells, always proving myself, never earning back real trust. When I started talking about having another baby, he reacted like I'd suggested something outrageous. He'd sneer and ask, "Why would we bring another child into this mess?" As if our family was still some disaster zone instead of a home we'd been trying to rebuild for over a decade. I wanted our son to have a sibling, to give us a chance at a new chapter. But Liam was cemented in the past, locked into seeing me only as the woman who betrayed him at 26. He'd talk about retirement plans and long-term goals, but it was clear, none of them included me. Every serious conversation ended with him reminding me why I didn't deserve more. That's when it hit me, no matter what I did, no matter how many years passed, he'd never see me as anything but the cheater. That was my permanent identity in his mind. The breaking point came when I suggested relocating, better opportunities, cheaper living, a bigger house, a true fresh start. Liam looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Why would I build a future with someone I can't trust?" he said. And suddenly, everything clicked. He admitted he'd been in solo therapy, not for us, but to process his trauma and plan his exit. He claimed I'd given him PTSD, attachment issues, scars that required professional help. He had rewritten our history into his own hero story, the wounded husband carrying unbearable pain. And then came the blow that shattered everything. He told me he was done. He didn't want another baby. He didn't want to move. He didn't even want to pretend anymore. He said he'd wasted 12 years trying, only to finally accept that reconciliation was pointless and he deserved better. He told me I had ruined him in his prime, that I'd destroyed the man he could have been. And now, he wanted me to taste the same devastation. His voice was colder than I'd ever heard. It dripped with cruelty. He said I had taught him that there are no real teammates in life, so now it was my turn to learn that lesson. And just like that, he revealed he'd already hired a divorce lawyer. No discussion, no last shot at counseling, no fight to save what we'd built, just his final decision. 16 years over, not because he suddenly broke, but because he was done punishing me and ready to walk into a new life. He called me a monster. Said he couldn't wait to be free of me. After 12 years of carrying his constant reminders, of begging for forgiveness he never planned to give, that's how it ended. With the truth, that he'd been biding his time, waiting for the day he could cut me loose. When Liam filed, he did it with military precision. Within a week, I was served. He'd moved out and taken our son. And worse, he'd already secured temporary custody by painting me as unstable and manipulative, a serial liar who used threats to trap him in marriage. His lawyer, a shark. The kind who lives to dismantle wives in court. She built me up as the cheating, deceitful woman who never deserved her family in the first place. They painted me as the woman who trapped Liam in a toxic marriage while he was too noble to walk away. The hearings were nothing but character assassination. Liam put on the perfect performance. Every old fight, every late night with friends, every tense moment from our 16 years, he spun into proof I'd been cheating non-stop. In reality, it was just those 2 affairs back in year 4, mistakes I'd spent over a decade atoning for. But the part that gutted me most was watching him with our son. Suddenly, Liam was Father of the Year, on the sidelines of every game, helping with homework, showing up to every event. All the things he barely managed when we were married, he poured into his performance as the devoted single dad. It was like he'd been saving his parenting for this moment, to show the world how perfect he was without me weighing him down. The judge bought it completely. Here was a clean-cut man who'd beaten addiction, invested in therapy, rebuilt himself. And then there was me, with my 12-year-old infidelity. It didn't matter that I'd been faithful ever since. It didn't matter how hard I'd fought for my family. The only thing that mattered was the narrative Liam and his attorney had scripted. I was the poisonous one, the problem, the reason everyone would be better off if I were minimized. Every time I tried to defend myself, it was twisted as denial or manipulation. How do you fight against someone who's been cataloging your flaws for 12 years? How do you defend yourself against a man who turned forgiveness into the perfect setup for revenge? The system didn't just fail me, it punished me all over again for sins I'd already served time for. And Liam knew exactly how to work it. 18 months later, the divorce was final. He walked away with primary custody and I was ordered to pay spousal support because I'd been the higher earner. The irony was brutal. When we were together, my career supported us both. Now, it was my personal penalty. He bought a stunning house in the nicest neighborhood, enrolled our son in an elite private school, all funded in part by my checks. Liam was finally living the dream life he'd mapped out during those years of fake reconciliation. And me? I ended up crammed into a tiny apartment, working endless hours to pay legal bills and support orders. What stung most wasn't even the money, it was how everyone around us reacted. Our friends applauded Liam for finally standing up for himself, like he was brave for escaping a marriage he'd deliberately chosen to stay in. They call him a hero and me a cautionary tale. If I was so awful, why did he stay 12 years? Why father a child with me? Why keep building a life if forgiveness was never real? The truth is, he wanted both worlds. He wanted the family, the stability, the appearance of a good marriage, while also keeping my mistakes as a weapon in his back pocket. When I pushed for more, for another baby, a real future together, he decided it was time to cash in on all those years of resentment. This wasn't a failed reconciliation. It was a carefully plotted revenge. He never moved past year 4, he just waited for the perfect moment to ruin me. Now, he's the model divorced dad, collecting sympathy, while I'm the living warning about what happens to cheating wives. He gets praise and support. I get silence and judgment. Even my own son looks at me like I broke our family, never knowing his father spent 12 years orchestrating this exact ending. And the cruelest part? I know what people think. That I got what I deserved. That cheaters always pay. That Liam was justified in everything he did. But they don't understand what it feels like to spend 12 years repenting for mistakes you made in your 20s, only to discover it was all for nothing. They don't know what it's like to realize your husband's forgiveness was never forgiveness, it was evidence gathering. Liam didn't leave because of what I did in year 4. He left because he had wrung everything he could from punishing me and was ready for his real life to begin. 12 years wasted on a man who was never going to see me as anything but a betrayer. 12 years of walking on eggshells, proving my loyalty, begging for love, only to find out I was living in a prison of his design. He got his freedom. But in the process, he revealed the truth. Not a man of growth and forgiveness, but a manipulator who turned marriage into a sentence I could never finish serving. And I was too blind, too hopeful, to see it until he'd already won.